Hi folks, this is Slick Slices here. Now this is an open tag video which is a reply to most intimidating knives versus least intimidating knives. Now this one is not particularly unusual in this. One or two people have shown one of these in as their most intimidating knife, and I think actually this is more intimidating. It's not the biggest knife I've got, not by any means. What's intimidating about this is a couple of things. First of all, it's made as a fighting knife, but unusually in a fighting knife, unlike the K-bar American fighting knives or even the M3 fighting knife. These are very rarely sharp. The edges are not generally sharpened. Now you do get some that are field sharpened, but this one was used in the field. But this one I need to sharpen it because the one thing that these are for is for stabbing, and in the training manual that came with them back in the war, it showed you all the points in which you should stick this in. It's got a 7-inch blade with a needle point, and the idea is that is good for poking into carotid arteries and hearts and various other parts in the body which are particularly vulnerable to a knife attack in order to kill as quickly and silently as possible. This particular one belonged to my grandfather, Air Vice Marshal D.E. Ted Hawkins, CB, CBE, DSO and bar, 3 mentions in dispatches as well. This was his. He carried it in Borneo when he was flying people in behind the Japanese lines. They said if you fire a gun, you'll bring the entire Japanese army down on top of you, and that's not a good thing. So they were trained in stealthy killing. Now he never actually had to use it, I'm glad to say. How he'd have come off compared to Japanese who are not afraid to use his gun or his sword or his bayonet or whatever. So I'm glad it never got used like that. But this Mark III Fairbairn Sykes knife from World War II. But I'll try and stick to folding knives for the purposes of this video, although I am going to come back to that. What have I got that's sort of intimidating versus not intimidating? Well, we've got Andre de Villiers. It's not a great flip on this knife, but this is a big chunky 3.5 inch or 3 3/4 inch butcher blade knife. To be honest, I think it looks more intimidating than it is. I don't think as a fighting knife it would be a particularly effective thing, because it's got the sheep's foot blade, which gives it a relatively broad point rather than a very stabby point. But the contrast to that, to give you the unintimidating, has got to be this. Now I don't have a small butcher's blade anymore. I only have the Impe, but this is the 2-inch Impe, and that is about as far off to the extreme of that one as you're ever going to find. Another alternative. Now I don't have any of the really big open L's. There's very little point in the UK. These are the sort of knife if you're going for a picnic, and you could probably get away with carrying without having any fear of PC Plod taking you into custody. But you still have the risk of having it confiscated. So the number 8 is probably big enough for most purposes. But now this isn't actually the smallest one they do, but it's the largest one that's UK legal to carry as it stands. And this is a titchy, tiny little thing. Which is the number 5. Absolute little baby. I personally think this is really too small to be an effectively usable open-L plus. In order to make it UK legal, it doesn't have the collar lock on it, and with such a sharp little thing as that, I find that quite intimidating in itself. Now, just to show an extreme here of intimidating versus non-intimidating. This is really just to illustrate my least intimidating knife that I have, and that's this little Moki, which has a 1-inch blade, but it's also very pretty. So compared to the Medford there, this little dainty little thing with its mother of pearl cover is just as I don't think you can get any less intimidating than that, even compared to a Swiss Army knife, SD Classic, which I suppose is, you know, the classic non-intimidating knife. The blade on the Moki is even smaller. Obviously it's a bit broader, but it's 3/4, 2/3 of the length. Now in the slip joint world, you can. I've got some. Let's get that out of there. I've got some largish knives that could be considered relatively intimidating, like the Grandaddy Barlow and the large toothpick. Perhaps the antithesis to those might be the Pocket Hunter to the Barlow, and the 3-inch toothpick to the 5-inch toothpick. They're pretty extreme, I would have said, but the real extreme comes. I take these out of the way. Between the Pocket Hunter, between the Pocket Hunter and this Winchester cartridge series, and this is truly a large knife, though it's a slip joint. It is of a size of the Medford on Belay. It's a genuinely behemoth of a knife. Now, finally, we were talking about what's intimidating. Well, this is the, go back to my grandfather's Fairbairn Sykes knife. And I want to compare this to this, which is actually, let's turn it around, which is the Extrema Ratio BD4, which, although it only has a 6-inch blade as opposed to the 7-inch blade, overall it's almost the same length. It's maybe a 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch in it. And if you imagine that when you're holding this, you're holding it like this. The Extrema Ratio, you're holding more like this, and that means that you know, from your thumb out to the tip. It's pretty much the same size. But in order to show a bit of contrast here between that and something more modest, this is the opposite end of the BD range from Extreme Ratio. This is the BD0, which is a 2-inch blade, which is more akin to, you know, the little knives. The even the little open L number 5, and this is actually quite a nice little carry knife. It's only 2 inches long. It's very sharp, N690 steel, as is this one. But this one you can tuck away in your pocket. The only problem is, of course, we're in the UK and it's a liner lock, and as a result, it's not a legal carry, which is a bit of a shame, because who could say that that was anything other than a non-intimidating knife? Okay, that's probably enough. I think there's enough contrast there. If you like this stuff, please remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more of these videos, and there are a few on the way, then please remember to subscribe and ring the bell if you want notifications. Thank you very much. Bye.